name is Natalia. I am a dietitian, registered dietitian for your health plan, and I just love food. I also love helping people who are struggling with any kind of condition, specifically today, kidney disease, serious. This is part 2 today, and I'm here to bring you science-based knowledge with practical applications for your awareness when it comes to your kidney health. So last week we talked about part 1, and I'll do a brief recap, and today part 2 we'll talk about other things, and next week in part 3 we'll have some more fun. As you're entering the chat box in the presentation, please be sure to save questions at the end and I will address them. I also enter my email in there in case you have questions and prefer to reach out that way. But we're gonna go ahead and get started. I'm gonna be coming in and out of the slide so that you get a little more of interaction that way with me, and also so that I don't bore you to death. No, I'm kidding, I wouldn't do that. But I'm about to share my screen, and I am using 2 screens to make sure that this goes really well for all the parties involved. So let's go ahead and get started, and hopefully you can see the right screen. And okay, please let me know in the chat box if you can just see the PowerPoint screen. Or just tell me. Hopefully you can see the right screen. Thank you very much for your comments in the chat box. Okay, awesome. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right. Well, as I was mentioning, I am a registered dietitian. I'm very into science-based knowledge. And today with Kidney Series Part 2, we'll talk about a few more very key functions of the kidney as it pertains to what you consume. So as I work with you last week, I do want to ask you what went well, and just a brief recap of what you learned. You know, what your takeaways, and what we cover was the kidney function, what the kidney does for us, hydration and drinks. We talked about alcohol, sodium, and processed foods. And I told you about the QIGONG kidney exercises to restore the vitality and qi, that is the energy that we have in all our organs, but sometimes it gets depleted by food choices and lifestyle. So that's what we talked about last week. And if you can just reflect what went well, it's always good to have a self-reflection and see how the information was retained and hopefully applied into your day-to-day. So what you will learn today is we're going to talk about kidney stones, factors that impact your kidney's ability to filtrate, and that ties a lot into protein and animal protein, and I'll tell you about balancing your protein intakes and some plant-based options. So that will be what we will cover today. In part 3 we'll cover more topics. So I have a question. You know, most people that I work with, not just with kidney disease, but just overall, I feel people have a lot of questions about, all right, like, why should I eat in terms of protein? And, you know, what is, for example, if we're talking about breakfast, what would the best breakfast for my kidneys? So if you're able to see my slide, I have 3 breakfast choices. One is a bowl of cereal. Another one is 2 pieces of poached scrambled eggs, and also a few slices of bacon. And then the third choice is a coffee and a donut. So for the ones that are participating here today, and this is not a right or wrong, I just want to know, what do you feel would be the best breakfast for overall health, also considering your kidneys? Just take a wild guess if you don't know. And if you don't know, that's all right. All right, cereal. All right, thank you. I appreciate the response. Okay, any other takers? If there's none, then I'll move on and to tell you that, these are very common breakfast options that I see people consuming. And unfortunately, none of them would be optimal. For kidney health, the one that would be the least damaging to the kidneys would be the cereal, depending on the sugar intake. But we know that the bacon, unfortunately, has a little sodium, which we talked about last week, but also the kind of protein that our kidneys have a really hard time managing. And we'll talk about more today. So as you can see, I invite you to take a look at what you're eating. And I wanted to talk about this slide because a lot of people get super drawn by maybe the calories, right? And we'll grab something, on the go, like a muffin and like a latte, for example, without knowing, the sugar, or it could be like a breakfast egg muffin, which is on the go. And a lot of people will just focus on the protein as an example, without really looking at the whole picture and looking at the numbers. So I wanted to point out the calorie difference between a lot of very beneficial foods and how the nutrition facts differ, and how really you can get more bang for your buck, nutritionally speaking, if you choose more wholesome foods. And that's what we will be talking today as it pertains to kidney stones and protein choices overall. So you probably wouldn't think that that amount of food has fewer calories than the muffin and the latte. However, it does, because all the latte and the muffin have a lot of sugar, whereas your other breakfast that contains 2 eggs and a good amount of broccoli and a cup of fruit is not that high calorie. So that's a concept that I'm going to be introducing today. And this was just a quick example. And from my last class last week, I hopefully made impact in your life by sharing the message of the need of making sure that you are focusing your life, consuming life, wholesome foods versus dead foods. And I know that's funny, quite funny to hear, what is she talking about? And what I'm talking about is consuming foods that are not man-made, that have a lot of chemicals, and not being driven by the grams of protein or how the face looks like of the product. That's how I call it, the face. It's important that you learn how to read ingredients if you are really depending on packaged foods, because you'll realize if it's a good match for you or not. And to try to make most of your choices in a more wholesome way. And here I have eggs, which if you look at the ingredient is just eggs, right? There's nothing in there that is going to get in the way of the kidneys filtering. I don't know if you know this. And last time we talked about all the many functions of the kidneys. And one of the main things that the kidney does is maintaining a balance between acid and base, and talks about pH. And I'll tell you all about that today because it pertains to protein a lot. So just be mindful that you may not feel your kidneys working for you. I feel we do sometimes go about our lives without really knowing what goes on when we eat, when we drink. And I'm here to bring awareness and inviting you to reflect on how your choices are impacting your organs, the kidneys specifically, even if you don't notice it in even if the kidney is not talking to you. Maybe your kidney is talking to you in your blood work, and we'll talk about that again today. But there's a lot of things you can do to assure that the kidneys are being fed right, and that will translate into you being fed right. So as we move on and talk about kidney stones, believe it or not, a lot of people get attacked. So anybody here, I do want to ask, has anybody here, and I'm going to stop my screen share for a second. Has anybody here experienced a kidney stone attack? And if people haven't, that's all right. But I just have to ask. And if you want to share your experience, you're more than welcome. If you don't, I'll share from people that have a kidney stones, and it is a very, very painful experience where people have to be taken to the hospital. And it doesn't happen because of one thing that you eat. It's chronic. So the consumption of foods that unfortunately build up in our system, and when it comes to kidney stones, there's a lot of factors that impact the progression and accumulation of those kidney stones, and then it's super painful. So a lot of things to know and apply in your day to day, so to really avoid being in pain and ending up in the hospital, when right now you have the tools. So as you can see in my screen, and please let me know if you cannot see my screen correctly. I'm pretty sure you can. But the main thing with kidney stones is that it's on the rise. And it happens because of just excessive intake of animal products. And I'll tell you more about that today. High sodium intake, this is processed sodium. I mentioned last week, there's sodium naturally occurring in very key foods that actually help the kidneys, like seaweed, for example, and beans and legumes. These have minerals. So don't worry about that sodium, especially if you're using a tracker like MyFitnessPal, and it tells you, oh, kidneys that are just not from the can that I cook for. If it tells you it has sodium, it's because those are naturally occurring minerals in the foods, and that's all right. I'm talking about the sodium from the processed foods that is added in. That kind of sodium, that is what really doesn't help with kidney stones. It just helps make those crystals be harder and super painful when they're coming down. Poor hydration, which we spent a lot of time talking about last time, and I made you think about how you could meet at least a minimum of 75 ounces. Bowel disease, sometimes when people have bowel issues, unfortunately, some of the byproducts of metabolism, which we'll talk about a little more today, don't get processed quite right, and then they end up in the kidney kind of stuck because that's the filtration system. So just keep that in mind. Or we are what we eat, and our gut and our kidneys and all that we are, the skin, the brain, the eyes, all that we are is a food choices in our environment. So I invite you to think about your body that way, not just my body is what the scale says. There's much more to that. And as we are talking about kidney health and overall health activity, when we sit a lot, and I showed you the kidney exercises last time to bring blood flow to those kidneys, it's going to be very helpful. But if you move, imagine the blood flow and oxygen that is delivered to those kidneys. So when I have conversations with individuals that want to improve their health, they mention that activity is not part of their life, and that there's no time, and that it's very difficult to fit it in. And the conversation that I have is, well, whatever activity that you're able to do is better than none, whether it be going up the parking lot in the admin building or taking the dog out, whatever activity in any amount is good. If you can progress, that would be amazing, because as I've mentioned, the blood and oxygen that your heart pumps, it goes all the way through your body and it feeds your organs. So keep that in mind. Obesity and gout is something that we'll talk about more on our part 3, but it does impact the formation of kidney stones. So as you keep that in mind, then as you look at your blood work, I'm kind of the practitioner that looks at patterns, and I know to not just look at number just as at one number. And last week we talked about the kidney health main markers, right? Creatinine and GFR. I mentioned that the GFR is the filtration rate, and today we're going to talk a lot about what the balance of your kidneys and how this is impacted by your food choices when it comes to a protein, a good amount, and other food choices. But again, your GFR is the ability of your kidneys to filtrate waste products and byproducts of metabolism. That's the byproducts of the foods that we eat that we need to process a certain way. And then the creatinine is another number to look at. So these are the two main kidney factors and markers in your blood work that will tell you if your kidneys is trying to tell you something. And then we also have other conditions. We talked about high blood pressure last time and sodium a good amount, gout, so this is a picture that for me makes sense because we're really all connected. So I invite you to look at your blood work and look at the patterns and how these numbers have been over the last few years, not just at today's or this year's numbers, because there could be patterns there and you saw a positive shift. Maybe ask yourself, what was I eating? What was I doing? When my numbers were better. So just take a look at those numbers and know that a lot of your day-to-day choices can make a big difference. All right, so let's talk about something that is very exciting, and it is, the metabolism of foods and your kidneys. And I'm going to focus on protein a good amount, but I'll touch on base on other foods. But pretty much, as you can see, your kidney cleans the blood, and also the blood that has waste products. Where are the waste products coming from? From many, many, many different sources, and we're not going to get too much into that. But there are waste products from our food and just our environment and just overall. And your kidney does a good amount of work in maintaining and making sure that there's clean blood, right? And that there's the blood that has the waste products is pretty much filtered out, and that everything goes into the urine. So it's a very interesting process. But what I want to ask you, and you ask yourself, is what are the waste products that your kidney filters? You may not know, but there's a lot of toxins in the processed foods that unfortunately we grab and go without really thinking, oh my goodness, this is going to tax my kidneys. And it really does. What are you eating? What am I eating or drinking that is making my blood have more waste products than need be? And how willing am I to look at my choices now that I am given the information to help my kidneys? Hopefully I'm planting seeds, and maybe from some of you, it'll be more than planting seeds. Maybe you'll want to take action, and that's very individual. Maybe it's not until you got your blood work that you were realizing that your kidneys were saying, hey, I need help. But that's just some self-reflection as we speak. And I'll have some other self-reflection questions at the end. So keep that in mind as we go throughout the series today. Any questions I know will be answered at the end. So I'm going to move forward and share with you what happens when you treat kidney disease with food and lifestyle. So believe it or not, during metabolism, some foods can increase the acid levels, while others can get rid of the extra acid. And this is, I'm going to make sure that I talk about this so that you understand what kind of acid I'm talking about. The kidneys help regulate these acid levels in our bodies. And if we reduce the acid producing foods that we consume, and we consume more alkaline foods, then that is the path for optimal kidney health. And I want to make sure that you know that foods that are acidic are not the same as acid producing foods. And I'll stop my share real quick, but you have to understand that if you have GERD, reflux, right, and you avoid tomatoes and oranges and citrus, just because that gives you heartburn, those are foods that are acidic. What I'm talking about here, and what's very important for you to understand as we dive today into our topic, is that when we eat certain foods, and the metabolism part of consuming the food, digesting the food, and transforming the food into substance, brain, skin, part of your kidneys, because it's all cells, there are byproducts that are made, and some of these products are acids, and there's a scale on the acid chart, and I'll share with you about that. So that is the acid that I'm talking about, not the acid that is in the oranges and the tomatoes, in the citrus that you would avoid when you have GERD. This is the acid that is made by the metabolism, right? The breakdown of the foods that we consume. Very different. So I want to make sure that you are aware of that difference, because it's a big, big difference. So I'm going to share my screen again. If I find my screen share, it just went away. So okay, here we go. I apologize. All right, so hoping you can see my screen, and if you cannot see my screen, let me know. But as you can see, this is the pH scale of the acid and alkaline that I'm talking about, not the acid of whether a food is causes me GERD or not. So you can see that the more acidic foods are unfortunately the wine, the meat, the sugary foods, the sodas, and as you can see, towards the more alkaline, the more basic foods. You can, if you took chemistry, or maybe this is not familiar to you at all, but it's the best thing that I can do to explain to you what we want to be eating more of the foods, towards the right of the screen. Those are the plant-based foods. There's plant-based protein options that I'll tell you all about today. And these are the ones that the kidneys have an easier time working with, because they're not as acidic. So that is really something to keep in mind as today we talk about our topic, and in terms of eating the right foods. And this is just therapeutic foods. You want to know that your kidneys can be improved if we consume the foods that will have it in balance. So when kidneys are sick, they can improve when there's a good balance between the acid foods, which again are more, hard cheese, your processed meats, your bacon, full fat animal products. And alkaline, it's more the plant-based foods, unprocessed. So a lot of this is it's up to you, which ones do you want to consume more of? If you eat less of these acidic foods and eating more of these alkaline therapeutic foods. And when I use the term therapeutic, is because it's that therapy that the food is giving to you. So please keep that in mind. So very simple. We want to eat more in a way that promotes the kidneys to be happy, and very simple. It's just your fruits, your vegetables, your colors. This is very, very important to know. And unprocessed, and a variety of nutrients. Your kidney depends lots of different nutrients. And I don't know if you guys know about goji berries, but goji berries are some of the best foods for the kidneys, because they help restore the chi, the energy from the organ. So if you're into fruits and veggies and you haven't tried goji berries, they're some of the best ever. And of course they come from plants and they're unprocessed. So, and they have lots of nutrients. So just keep that in mind. And, more of the acidic way is, the concern that you may not be aware of is that when there's too much acid buildup, and again, this is the acid that is the byproduct of digestion and absorption of these foods, what happens in your body is that it can build up, and when to the point where your kidneys cannot deal with the extra acid, and then it builds into the bloodstream, especially if kidneys are sick, and that term is known as acidosis. And that is a very dangerous state of being to be. People are sent to the hospital and they're thrown off. And this happens because of a way of eating that is just the pattern of a lot of animal products and added sugar, alcohol, which we talked last week, convenient processed foods. And I see a lot of this happening in folks that bacon is a regular part of their weekly intake, sausages and cheese and meats. And I'm not saying to never consume these foods. However, if you're looking at your labs and you're attending this class and you want to improve, just ask yourself, how much do I eat these foods right now? And what do I want to know if I know that my kidneys are having a super hard time managing these foods? Because remember, your kidneys filtrate. And again, acidosis is a very dangerous way to be, because this balance is done by the kidneys. And when the kidneys can no longer work and they're tired, like overworked, this condition, acidosis, can lead to osteoporosis, muscle loss, make heart failure worse, make you feel super fatigued, have a lot of headaches, taste changes, and really aggravate and make your kidneys worse if they're already sick. So I'll give you alternatives to, some of maybe the most commonly consumed animal proteins, and tell you the value of the plant-based proteins, because that is what these foods are very therapeutic. So switching gears and talking more about protein, because I know we're here to talk about, choices, and, we all need protein. We are made out of protein. My concern is, are your protein choices able to be healthy for your kidneys? So I'm gonna stop my screen share real quick. So when a lot of people want to eat healthy, they tell me, Natalia, these are my choices. And for most folks, the protein is the area that needs more improvement when in terms of quality, regardless of the grams of the package, and regardless of maybe how convenient it is for you. If it's not quality, the protein that you're looking at will be very hard to be transferred into what you probably think or want it to be. So our muscles are made out of protein, but our cells are made out of protein. And if those choices are incompatible with our digestive tract and the way that we were made as human beings to digest and absorb and pretty much transform the food into substance that we are, not just your kidneys are going to suffer, but a lot of your body's not going to feel great. And you may be going to the gym and wanting to put on lean muscle mass, or you may just want to maintain a healthy weight, and there's these kidney values that are out of range. And looking at your protein choices very closely is huge. So in addition to what else we've been talking about today, so I'll share my screen again and talk a little more about the power of protein and what that means for you. I know that's a really cute picture of the kidneys just being fed by plant foods, and that's why I put it in there. And just keep that in mind. So protein, we need it for muscle mass to feel satisfied, for our metabolism to work really optimally. And I'm here to tell you that, yes, we need protein, and that not all proteins are created equal. So we have protein coming from fish, and we have proteins coming from eggs, which are different from the proteins coming from chicken and beef. But the main differentiator here is that there's plant-based proteins, such as your beans, your peas, your lentils, and all those are called legumes. And these are awesome foods for the kidneys. They feed really well. Your kidneys really feed well from these foods if they're unprocessed. And there's also plant-based proteins in nuts and seeds, which is good. The one thing to keep in mind with nuts and seeds is that a small amount of nuts can be a lot amount of calories. And it's not all about the calories, it's about the quality of those calories. So just keep that in mind. A lot of people, when they work with me, they'll say, oh yeah, I snack on nuts and peanuts because I have heard they're healthy. I'm like, well, they are, but not all nuts are created equal. However, if you just snack on nuts throughout the whole day, you may consume up to 600 calories without knowing. And you didn't really get back for your buck for those 600 calories. So just watch that. There's better sources. Like, I'm going to talk a lot about plant-based, beans and legumes. But just know that not all proteins are created equal. And as I share this slide with you, just know that according to the World Health Organization, eating about not even 2 slices of bacon a day can increase the chance of somebody developing colon cancer by 18%. I know we're talking about kidneys, but this is something that a lot of people don't know, and there's a lot of colon cancer incidents, and is because of the quality of the protein choices that are made throughout a lifespan. So as we talk about quality, not just talking about quality of food, let's talk about the quality of your life and how you want your quality of life to be. So sometimes we wake up and we're like, oh no, it's Monday, or oh no, it's Tuesday, or whatever day it be, and we don't feel the best. And I'm here to tell you that a lot of what we put in our body, a lot of what we do or don't do, that be exercise or no exercise, TV or no TV, smoking or no smoking, you know what I'm talking about. Poor quality choices, food and lifestyle will unfortunately impact you on the day-to-day, but also at the long term. And think of yourself as a car, that if it's put the right fuel, the engine is going to be smooth and not giving you a lot of troubles, and there's going to be more efficiency. So I'm not saying that if you make better choices, you're going to be the energized and bunny, but you may feel a little more focused and less tired, and more up to functioning, whether that be work or being with the family, whatever if you want it to be, or whatever your life is. Because really, food is hopefully will become energy and substance, or it may not be. And a lot of people that I work with that come meet me, a lot of members tell me, hey Natalia, I just don't have time for all this right now. I don't have time to make better food choices. I don't have time to cook, because I'm gonna do that when I retire. And this is something that I deal with on a day-to-day basis when I talk to folks, is that when you retire, it may be too late. And I say this coming from the heart, because I've worked in different settings. And one of my settings was working at a nursing home. And I saw the picture that you see to the left of your screen, poor quality life based on poor quality choices. So I invite you to think about how you feel about you are taking care of your body, because you only have one. And it's not just about how you want to feel today or the next day or the next week, is how do you want your life to be if you have kids and grandkids, or if you don't, how do you want your life to be in 5-7 years, or when you retire. So as we talk about that, I invite you to think about the power of plant-based foods and plant-based protein. So when you eat more, there's less calorie density in foods. There's more fiber, which makes you full, and there's way more nutrients. So by nutrient density, I mean the amount of nutrients in a food compared to the number of calories. I feel we are in a world that is very up to programming a lot of individuals in many different aspects. And I see this in my work day to day when people tell me, I chose this food because it has 50 calories. And when we look at the food, it's toxic. It's not helping the kidneys. It's not helping the weight. It's not helping the blood pressure. It's not helping anything. And the individual just focuses on the calories without looking at the nutrients. So you have to look at the nutrients. And if you worry about your weight, and if you look at your blood work, and BMI and waist circumference was something that charted off, I'm here to invite you to think about, what you consume, especially when it comes to your veggies and your fruits, and invite you to think that if your stomach is empty and you are super hungry, and we eat cheese, for example, right? That's not gonna get the job done. It's not gonna satisfy you. Yes, it's keto compliant and it doesn't have any carbs. That's not all there is to taming hunger. So here I have a picture of 3 stomachs, and I know you wouldn't eat 400 calories of oil. That would be like maybe 2 tablespoons of oil. maybe a little more, but you wouldn't eat oil. So I use cheese instead. So 400 calories of cheese, maybe, 3 or 4 slices of cheese, or, they already sliced depending on the cheese, but that wouldn't get the job done if you're hungry. Now, if you eat 400 calories of fried chicken, that wouldn't get the job done either, because your stomach wants to be satisfied and filled with foods that satisfy it. And satisfaction could be for you at the taste level, but internally, and as I've been talking about today, think about your organs, your stomach. If you're hungry and you're just choosing animal proteins, it's going to fall short. Something to note about fiber is that fiber acts like the sponge that you use to clean your dishes. So when you eat fiber and you start with that with a meal, and you have done a good job hydrating, then that fiber is going to expand in your stomach. So that's going to help you feel less hungry. So that's another cool advantage. So when it comes to your protein choices, you probably already know, and what I'm going to tell you right now, when it comes to animal proteins, there's some that are better than others, but this is a funny saying. I used to work with a lot of kids, I still do, but what the message is the fewer the legs, the better. And fish, most are great. I'm not gonna get into the nitty gritty of fish right now, but salmon, it has a lot of omega-3, which is anti-inflammatory for you, and it helps your brain be sharper and avoid dementia. So salmon is one of the best. If you don't want salmon, no big deal. There's other fish. Your white meat, you already know this, boneless, skinless, and breast and thighs are best. And, our four-legged guys versus the no-legged guys, which are the fish, tend to have a little more fat, and is the kind of protein that I mentioned. Your kidneys have a harder time processing and produce that acid that I was mentioning, can lead to a lot of complications. So, if you're gonna make this choice, make it top loin or a sirloin that's going to be lower fat content, or your 90%. Seafood could be better than fatty meat, depending on how you cook it. But peas and lentils and beans, those are some of the best foods that you can consume. So, if you do eat other protein choices, mostly from animal, fried and breaded sauces and gravies and marbling, tend to be something that sometimes we don't talk about or we don't mention. So I wanted to make sure that I brought it up. So as we talk about protein, I do want to know, how much protein do you think you should be consuming? I just have some examples here, at the size of a deck of cards, the size of a CD, your whole palm. And you probably already know is the size of the palm. And why? Because our bodies are proportional with, our protein needs are proportional with the size of our palm and the thickness. So that translates, honestly, for most people, could be 3, could be 5, maybe 6. But what do I see a lot of people eating when I go in and I eat out, or when they bring me their food journals, people that I work with, it's like 8 or 12 ounces of steak. And it's like, oh boy, all right, well, how often is that done? If that's done once a week, maybe it's not a big deal. But if it's done, 5 days a week, maybe the kidneys will be like, hey, it's a little too much. So with kidney disease, again, that's a really basic rule to go by. But again, more doesn't equal better. And I feel a lot of people have this, that more protein is better. And I'm here to tell you that that is not true, and that a quality, amount, and timing of protein is key. And I'll tell you more about that. So please keep that in mind. You don't need as much protein as you think you may need. So the quality is important. So you have this chart where I mentioned, the amount of food yielding a certain amount of protein. So you can see lentils are awesome. A lot of people tell me, Natalia, you're so muscular, you're an athlete, you look so fit. What do you eat? And I tell them, well, a lot of my makeup is beans and lentils and eggs, and I do eat some fish, but I'm very plant-based because I know how the processing of food, and lentils are my go-to. I cook soups a good amount, and I have more tips for you on how to eat these foods, but hopefully you can realize that you can get a very good amount of protein by eating plant-based foods. And it's also the combinations that you make out of these foods. And I'm happy to sit down with you and work with you at this level if you need the help. And just know how it's really comparable to your animal foods. So I'll keep this chart and maybe look at it with the family and see what you're willing to do if your kidneys are asking for help based on your blood work. And here are just some of the bases that I wanted to share with you in terms of how you can invite more plant-based protein foods into your life. Meatless chili is a great one. Legume-based pasta. There's chickpea and lentils. If you don't have any issues with those foods, they're great. You don't need to add meat, so it's easy on the budget too. Veggies and legume-centered meals, salads and soups. Homemade smoothies. If you do use a protein powder, maybe plant-based protein. And if animal protein is a big part of your life and you're not really willing to give up your meat, I'm here to let you know that there's yogurts made out of different things that taste very similar, like coconut yogurt and coconut milk. So there's a lot of options. The world of food is endless, and that's what I have so much fun giving you all this information. The thing about beans and legumes is that 1 cup of lentils, it's not super high calorie, and it has so much folate, and folate does so much for us. It's an amazing B vitamin that our brain and cognitive function really depends on. Fiber, like if we don't consume enough plant-based fiber, our digestive system and our kidneys are gonna unfortunately struggle. Iron, sometimes there's a little anemia, and then protein, so legumes, which are against beans and peas and lentils, are awesome. And there's products made out of these foods. And this is just a brand. It doesn't have to be this brand, but most pastas, that are made out of chickpea or lentils have a really good amount of protein, more than your regular pasta. And they tend to have more fiber because it's coming from the bean, the lentil, right? Or the chickpea, and they're gonna be much more filling. And you don't have to put meat on here if you're realizing, oh boy, maybe my meat intake is what is messing up my kidneys. So again, doesn't have to be that brand. There's many brands out there, but hopefully you will look at your ingredients. So my next thing that I want to talk about is the amount. A lot of people are so stuck on, eating certain grams of protein. And I'm here to tell you that there's the myth that more protein is more muscle. And it's really not. I am an athlete. I've worked with athletes all my life. And I know what it takes to build muscle and maintain the muscle. So it's not a lot of what you think. So this is me, very strong, and I'm here to show you this because I don't eat a whole lot of meat, and you can still be strong and muscular and lean without a lot of animal products. So the important thing when it comes to protein and muscle is having it optimally distributed. So as you can see, when you eat wheat cereals or Pop-Tarts or granola bar for breakfast, that barely has 7 grams of protein, right? Maybe lunch, you get a sandwich in, maybe not even 20 grams. And then at dinner, what do? We overeat, right? We may overeat out of pleasure. We may overeat out of comfort. We may overeat because we just like to do that at night. And that's all right. Just be aware of it. But also know that if you're into maintaining your muscle, that this really doesn't work. What works is having a certain amount of protein at each mealtime, and that will also leave you more satisfied. And it's not 30 grams. Protein needs are individualized for really everybody. So if you have questions, reach out. But, this is just what I was mentioning, 10 grams for breakfast with an oatmeal, then maybe some pasta that is not from lentils or chickpeas, 15 grams for leftovers. And then what do we do at dinner? We have a huge steak or just a lot of chicken, or whatever it may be, especially if we're eating out, which happens a lot if we don't plan. So I invite you to look at your choices, but also take a look at how much you're eating at night. That's something that could be addressed, and not everything has to be perfect, but we want these protein intakes to be optimized throughout the day. And just know, if you are struggling with kidney disease, your protein needs may be less. I would have to look at your labs. And just know that factors that impact protein needs and usage are, again, your kidney health, your level of physical activity. More people think they need more protein than they really do. The quality of the protein that we talked about, and also digestive health. Can you really digest all the protein that you're consuming, or are you just super bloated and taxing your kidneys because of that? So again, if you have questions, reach out. There's a lot of misconceptions that I just see on a day-to-day. So I'm not going to go over the exercises today, the kidney exercises. You have the recording from last week, but I do want to talk about the chi in kidneys. The chi is the energy of all our organs, and the kidneys, as we age, as well as all our organs, starts to decline. So you can do the exercises, which I showed you last time, and help with that. But I'm also brought this slide out here today so that you think about the choices that you were presented with in terms of protein, in terms of eating a certain way, more acidity in your foods, from sugary processed foods and alcohol versus more plant-based. And know that your choices will either fortify the energy or deplete the energy. So which status do you want to be, in a depleted status or in a fortified status? So, as we are wrapping up, there are just some self-reflection questions that I invite you to take note of, and just, whenever you have a minute for yourself, that I invite you to create. If you don't have, ask yourself, what are the waste products that your kidney filters? I mentioned some of those. Maybe that could be a way of self-retaining the information. What are you eating and drinking that is making your blood to have more waste products than need be, and my kidneys being taxed? How willing am I to look at my choices, given what is being presented to me throughout these 3 weeks? And what, if anything, in my life, your life, you could say no to that is getting in the way of your self-care? What concerns you the most about your kidney health? And really, what is the most important thing that you should do to improve your health and quality of life? These are some good questions to ponder. So I invite always self-reflection after a consult, after a workshop, because I feel that's how information gets applied, or at least thought about, versus this just staying as part of this workshop. So hopefully you'll do that. And again, next time we'll talk about more habits and choices and lifestyle tips and trips, tips and tricks for sustained kidney health. We'll talk more about gout and obesity and other factors that I haven't covered, just because we really don't have a whole lot of time today. And I do want to save time for questions if anybody have questions. But again, I'm part of your health plan. If you want to work with me or Kay or any other dietitian on the plan, just know that we're available to you at no cost for 5 visits. And I personally love working with people because I had my personal journey with food. And I used to struggle with my weight a good amount. I was a chubby kid. I didn't fit in. And long story short, I decided to really turn my story into helping people. So if you have questions about anything we covered, that there's my contact information, or you can reach out to other dietitians. But again, when you work with someone, be open. I'm not the kind of dietitian who takes the joy of your foods away. I do a lot of awareness work with you in terms of your choices, and just ask you, what are you willing to do so that I can meet you where you're at based on your blood work and your goals and what you want your quality of life to be.